I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about my research and in the context of your course, a little bit about the fungi that I study, have been studying for the last decade or so here at Oklahoma State University. So I do want to mention a few of my funding partners. Right now, I'm actually primarily funded by the U.S. Department of Agriculture through what they call a NIFA postdoctoral fellow. And I've been here in Oklahoma since 2009 and part of the Division of Agricultural Sciences at Oklahoma State University. So I promised to talk mostly about fungi today, but I would like to just start with soil because soil is sort of what got me into this world. I don't know who else has the same story, but at 28, I decided to become an ecologist. And so it was really soil that brought me into that and an interest in the sustainable use of soil resources. And globally, we actually have quite a few problems with soil. I'm not sure if you're aware, but this map produced by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN highlights some of the areas in pink and red that we have the most soil degradation in the world, the most loss of soil to erosion or other issues such as the increase of arid areas that change the landscape through our regions of the world, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. And then the second world map was produced by a study into specifically iron deficiency in humans. And so a lot of my research that I'll get into towards the end of this 15-minute session really tries to build a connection or build a link between what's happening in soil ecology and then eventually the human nutrition. But what I hope stands out to you is that many of the countries that are dealing with human malnutrition issues are also some of the areas that in the previous map have a lot of degradation of soil. And so why am I talking about soil so much? Well, there's a soil microorganism that we call Arbuscular Mycorrhizal Fungi, or AM fungi for short. And they have really, through the last several decades, we have really discovered that they are like our tiny allies in the soil, and they can help us to sustainably meet the needs of food and nutrition for humanity while also protecting soil. And one of the reasons that is the biological or ecological relationships that are going on between most of the plant species that we grow in grasslands or in row crop agriculture, partnering with this microscopic fungi, AM fungi. So in my diagram here, the pink areas that connect to the roots represent those fungal structures that actually join with the plants and almost like the two organisms become one symbiotic entity. And they help the plant reach into the soil to acquire resources so that it can increase growth. There's also some evidence in very dry conditions or drought conditions that AM fungi can help the plant take up additional water. And even if it were not for the major benefits of the plants of hosting AM fungi, there would also be a huge benefit in the soil because these small fungal structures basically entangle particles in the soil and cause a healthier structure to form, as well as retaining additional fertility. I wanted to mention phosphorus in particular. This is the nutrient that AM fungi are the most connected with. And, over time, since the Industrial Revolution, we have been, as a species, utilizing more and more of an externally sourced phosphorus, most recently phosphate rock, to meet our global food production needs. So currently, we could say around half of the food on our plate is produced because of the way that we have utilized phosphorus and other fertilizers to improve production. But the distribution of global phosphorus resources that are mineable is not even across the planet. And in fact, the vast majority of phosphorus resources today remaining are in a non-democratic nation of Morocco. And there's quite a bit of concern about the global security issues related to this kind of concentration of phosphorus resources in one nation. And so this is, again, going back to a finer scale about the ecological relationship with plants. In my diagram here, I show a root, and there's this zone where the root can usually, near to the plant, the plant can usually absorb any nutrients that are close by. But we get this zone we call the depletion zone, where phosphorus and other nutrients in the soil may be further away, too far away from the plant for it to readily find and take those resources into its tissue. You add mycorrhizal fungi, which connect into the root structure and scavenge further into the soil for phosphorus. And this is really a trade that has happened over millions of years. A relationship is developed where the plant trades some of its extra carbon to the fungi, and the fungi finds resources in the soil to bring to the plant. So it's a mutualistic, or both partners benefit from the symbiosis. And when I say benefit, there are clear physical differences between the growth of plants. So we've done a lot of research where we've grown grasses, especially, in this case, the grass Panicum virgatum, or switchgrass. And Caitlin here is holding the root system of a switchgrass cultivar that she grew in the greenhouse. And the only difference between this system and this system is that we steamed the soil over here. So we removed those AM fungi from the system. So the plant is not benefiting from that nutrient uptake. I like to make this visual for people by saying that if I had just one teacup full of healthy soil here in front of me, and I stretched out these fungal structures, which we call hypha, from end to end to end, they could stretch across 30 soccer fields or 30 football fields. So it's all tightly packed within the soil, helping to improve that physical structure. And I mentioned this was an ancient symbiotic relationship. So by some estimates, we can see fossil records going back to 400 million years ago, where these kinds of structures existed. So it physically alters the plant cells when the fungi attach and grow into the cell to create those locations where the nutrients can be exchanged. And so as humans have only been around for 200,000 or so years, this is a much older than us, the relationship going on here between plants and fungi. The unfortunate thing is that in many parts of the world, we're losing AM fungi, not completely, but some research that we've done even among small-scale farmers in Zambia found that compared to local grassland systems where the fungi were well intact, in a lot of the farming systems that we have today, for several reasons, we can often see about half of the normal population of AM fungi. Part of this is the overuse of fertilizers in modern agriculture. Tillage of the system can physically break up and destroy the fungi as well. And so it's concerning to us because of the benefits to soil, the stability of soil, that we would be seeing a reduction in the AM fungal biomass around the world. So really my research focuses on a question about whether or not we can manage these tiny fungi. They can be part of increasing our agricultural efficiency and food production if we find an effective way to manage them. And I'll just mention in this microscopic picture here of the root system, these are actually the spores. So these fungi are reproduced primarily by asexual means. They produce spores. There is some recombination of DNA that happens by the same species because they can make a connection and share genetic material. But this is a great snapshot of what's happening physically in the root system. Now, if you were to pull up a plant root, you wouldn't probably physically see any of this because of how microscopic in nature these fungi are. And I'll just mention one more biological component here, which is that I primarily have worked with a species called Sorghum bicolor. That's the scientific name, or grain sorghum, it's often referred to. And it is a highly cultivated grain around the world, maybe number 5 in annual production in the world, especially grown in regions with lots of drought and other. It's a hardier plant than, say, something like corn. It uses about half the fertilizer and water, but its genetics are relatively simple, and so we use it in research to provide this sort of model of lots of other systems. In this case, any grasses that are sort of more active in the warm season of the year. We have quite a lot of genetic diversity in sorghum. However, my first research project with AM fungi, we assessed some of the ancient lines of sorghum that we have, compared them to really modern, highly modified lines that are out there in the commercial world. And in general, we found that those modern commercial lines have lost a lot of this relationship with AM fungi. So the plants are less dependent or reliant on receiving extra nutritional help in terms of collecting soil nutrients from the AM fungi. And the real important part of my research is that we discovered that those plants that host more AM fungi in their root systems, we can really see a remarkable increase in the yield and the nutrition of the grain. So in general, as we assess protein, zinc, iron, and some of the other nutrients that are typically a big problem in terms of the human population across the world, we were able to make this link between the colonization of the plant by AM fungi and the boost to yield and nutrition. So currently I am assessing a total of 50 genotypes. This was one of the more dramatic. So these plants in the background are the same exact genotypes as those in the front, and they're grown in the same type of nutrition conditions in the soil. The only difference, again, is that we steamed the soil in these pots, and we added back native local AM fungi to capture this difference in growth. We're also looking at the expression of genes in these plants, as well as the diversity of AM fungi in their root system as part of our assessments. So I won't go into too much more detail about that project because I've provided a recent publication that I did for a agricultural development group in Asia that gives some of the key terminology and a snapshot of my research, but this is similar to the last picture I showed you. I think this a picture's worth 1,000 words, and this table, the sorghum were grown with AM fungi, and in this table, we had eliminated them. So you can see the really important role that they play in crop nutrition. And with that, I'll take any questions that we have today.